What once was...
There was a time where there was no news about black people being written, and if it was being written, it was something bad.
They were integrated in Mesa. Chandler was not integrated. They bused all the people from Chandler, all the black kids from Chandler to Carver High School.
Making strides.
When I found out, ironically, that I became the first known black woman to have multiple WGA franchises, I was like, of course, it makes sense. We're still pioneering. We're still breaking barriers.
It was quite a challenge. I mean, I had threats against my life. People set fire to my newspaper in my driveway.
And hope for a better tomorrow.
Change is not easy, is what I've learned, but it does make me excited for the future.
History has a way of repeating itself, and I'm not surprised at all that we are here in the midst of essentially a second civil rights era.
You're watching an Arizona's Family Special, remembering the past, embracing the future.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Yetta Gibson, along with Erin LeBeau and Brandon Lee.
And we want to welcome you to an Arizona's Family Special report, remembering the past, embracing the future.
Yeah, 2020 was a year none of us will ever forget. From the election of Vice President Kamala Harris to a legendary business owner who found the recipe for success here in the Valley. There's a lot to celebrate during Black History Month.
But we also want to introduce you to a Valley family whose mission here has been to keep the legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers alive. First up tonight, the chant of Black Lives Matter rang loudly across the Valley, the nation, and the world.
What do we want? Justice! What do we want? Now! What do we want? Justice! What do we want? Now!
George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake. They're the most recent faces in a fight for equality. Their names chanted by people across the nation and around the world. People united to shine a light on the need for change. And yet, as you well know, change doesn't always happen quickly, but you're about to show us how the city of Tempe wasted little time making history.
Yeah, the city of Tempe, Brandon, embraced change by electing its first black mayor and naming its first black chief of police. I sat down with this history-making duo for their very first TV interview together. Okay, we're going to start first with, how do you feel in your new positions?
He was with the Tempe Police Department for 20 years, barely making it a year into retirement before Commander Jeff Glover returned, becoming Tempe's first ever African-American interim police chief. That happened October 2020.
It feels wonderful to be able to be the lead of a police department, to be the chief executive officer of an agency, and being the first black chief of a police department here in the East Valley. It's something special.
A few months earlier, Corey Woods was elected mayor of Tempe, the first black man to hold that seat.
And I'm just excited to be here and honored to serve, and just looking forward to the next 3.5 years.
Before being elected mayor, Woods served in the Tempe City Council for close to a decade, and leading is in his blood. He grew up in New York City and watched his parents be very active in the civil rights movement.
What I think about all the time is these things weren't that long ago. Yeah. There are people who are still very much walking this earth, like my father, who can tell stories about having to drive into the South and having to pack huge picnic lunches because you didn't know where you could stop and get food, because you didn't know where you could stop and actually use a restroom.
The biggest strides that are going to be made.
The first order of business for Chief Glover, he says, is to start with the Public Safety Task Force and getting really honest feedback and suggestions from the community.
Hey, listen to me! Listen!
There were multiple high-profile incidents involving Tempe police officers in 2020.
I mean, it is difficult because there's the lack of trust right now that's within policing, and it's understandable. In light of all of the events that have taken place across the nation, we don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore, which is something that I understood coming in, taking this role. But it's about being able to earn that trust.
So bridging the gap, yes.
Absolutely.
And Mayor, from your perspective, is there anything that you see right away that needs to be done in Tempe, changes that need to be done in this city?
The biggest thing I would say is that, and this is the honest truth, I mean, I feel like we have the right person here to work on doing those things. I've known Chief Glover since I started on the city council back in 2008, so we've been colleagues, we're personal friends.
Do you both feel any pressure with the Black Lives Matter movement and feeling like maybe it would be assumed that you're on the side of that? 100% versus being neutral and seeing both sides?
Actually, I don't really feel pressured by Black Lives Matter movement. You know, there's a lot of things that that they have brought up, concerns that are justified concerns. You know, so I look at it from both sides of the spectrum. Being a black person, because when I'm out of this uniform, I look like anybody else.
Sometimes there are more eyes on you. And it's interesting you made the comment regarding do I feel any personal pressure behind the black? I don't personally know. I mean, because my perspective is exactly what Chief Glover's is, that if I take the suit off, I'm a black man.
Both of these men in their new positions of power in the middle of a time when the world is facing civil unrest, a pandemic, and racial injustice.
Especially as it relates to just the images from the George Floyd incident. You know, you talk about disheartening and just the impact that has had on law enforcement, the need for re-imaging, rebranding, reshaping, just some of the things that has occurred in law enforcement. Seeing that was painful, but it's also something that, in terms of when you're looking at re-imaging and reshaping law enforcement, that is a perfect example as to why you have to have reform.
Reshaping, rebuilding, no doubt a huge task ahead for both of these black leaders who plan to make historic changes while already making history in their respective roles.
So February 2021, Black History Month, is there a message you want to send to people about how to reflect this year?
I think that the message should be that, you know, again, with American history, black people are a part of that history. We are part of the fabric of the community. We are part of the fabric of the history of America. We have done a lot in helping build this country, literally and figuratively. And we are just as important as anybody else. And we are still making strides as we were in the 60s, as we are today, and continuing to march forth.
But just looking at the two of us means there's clear progress that's been made. But at the same time, you know, as you talked about being a part of a new civil rights movement, there's still a lot more work to be done. And so I would just, you know, tell people to, you know, during February of 2021 to, you know, take an opportunity to kind of reflect on kind of, you know, how you've gotten to where you are and the sacrifices that people have made for you to have these opportunities.
History has a way of repeating itself. And I'm not surprised at all that we are here in the midst of essentially a second civil rights era.
The city of Tempe making history.
Yet a modern day history makers right there. Thank you for that. And by the way, speaking of history, the Arizona Informant now celebrating 50 years of storytelling about the African American experience. Every Wednesday, staff from the Arizona Informant take the time to bundle up its latest edition of the weekly newspaper for distribution across the valley.
Well, the Informant has been something that's been a part of our community for over 50 years. And my goal is to make sure that we have it here for another 50 years.
Images on the walls inside the Informant honor its founders and reflect 50 years of storytelling. From the election of President Barack Obama to community headlines across the valley.
There was a time where there was no news about black people being written, and if it was being written, it was something bad. And my dad's goal was to make sure that we put the accomplishments of the African American community, the championships, the things that they've done in the community in the forefront.
Clovis Campbell, who's rubbed elbows with the likes of Barack Obama, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and Oscar-winning director Spike Lee, is publisher of this family-owned business that boasts 100,000 weekly readers.
My dad actually bought the name Arizona Informant from a gentleman who owned it back in 1958. He only published about 2 issues, and then he stopped publishing the publication altogether. Eventually, my dad came up across him and said, "Hey, would you like to sell the newspaper?" He said, "Well, sure. I don't have much. I just have a name and no building, no property, etc." So we said, "How much you want to sell it for?" He said, "I'll sell it to you for $1." So we bought it for $1, and it is what it is today.
That $1 investment back in 1971 has paid huge dividends for a community whose stories often get overlooked by the mainstream media. As a matter of fact, on the front of every Arizona Informant newspaper is a special message.
If you look at our newspaper, on the front it says 98% of our news you won't find anywhere else. Well, that's true today. It's been true since 1971, and so we're still trying to do the same thing, recording Black history of the Arizona community.
Campbell also says that plans are underway to mark the 50th anniversary of The Informant later this year. Still to come, meet the woman who's put her heart and soul into a long-standing Phoenix restaurant. Her ingredients for success right after the break.
You're watching an Arizona's Family Special, remembering the past, embracing the future.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
That I will.
Kamala Harris made history by becoming America's first female vice president. She's also the first Black and South Asian elected to the nation's second highest office. As President Joe Biden's right-hand person, Harris is also a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and her AKA sisters are understandably beaming with pride.
We were elated. Very proud of our new vice president, very prideful, inspired, because she makes a difference as far as the young girls that look at her and see that her accomplishments that she's done.
Mrs. White's Cafe in downtown Phoenix has been serving up meals for more than 50 years. As with many restaurants, they've been hit hard by this pandemic. But through it all, with faith, love, and good cooking, they're still in business. America in 1923. The Yankees won the World Series. The Hollywood sign was erected on the famed Hollywood Hills. Warren Harding was president. But for Black America, 1923 was a dark time. The Rosewood Massacre is considered to be one of the bloodiest days in Florida. 500 KKK members hunted down Black people for 7 days, all of it part of a racial cleansing. Black women were raped. The men were beaten. 8 people were brutally murdered. That darkness was often recorded in music.
I got the world.
That year, in 1923, Bessie Smith had a #1 song, Downhearted Blues, a song that fit the times. It was also the year that Mrs. White was born.
It's not every day that I get the chance to sit down with somebody who's 97 years young, who has seen the things that you have seen.
I have seen some things. I have been in some things, and it just was not a lot of good things for Black people. You had to be more in sensitivity and manners, education, whatever, to get anything.
Let me ask you this, because I would love to know what these certain people meant to you in your lifetime. Rosa Parks.
Oh, she meant a lot to me. Rosa Parks was tired coming from work and sit down in the bus and somebody want to come in and take her seat. She got tired of that. She got tired of that. And she stood for what she wanted to do. She wanted to see progress.
The late Congressman John Lewis.
Oh, I tell you, he took my heart more than anybody because he was so humble. He was so humble. I never saw him get mad. I saw him, when he passed away, it just broke my heart. It just really broke my heart because he would say, too quiet and good.
Good trouble.
Good trouble. Good trouble. Don't go out there flat all up, all wound up before you get to know what you're doing. Do it quietly. Do it peaceably so you can get the point over to people what you're trying to do. A lot of people don't know now what we're trying to do. And they say the Black Lives Matter is a game.
Election night.
Mm-hmm.
The first female vice president
of
the
beautiful.
United States.
That's beautiful.
Is a Black woman.
I know. Black woman. That's good. I think that's beautiful. That's really off the chain. Because who would have thought a Black woman would be a president? Who would have thought a Black man would have been a president? But we did have that, and now we got a black woman. What's there about that? That's good.
It's off the chain.
That's right. that's really good. Put some seasoning in here.
Mrs. White's Cafe in downtown Phoenix is a staple in the community and has been for decades. Famous people who visit the Valley always make sure to stop by for a meal and conversation.
I say food is an art. It's an art. You have to know how to cook it. You have to know how to put it together, make it taste edible and look edible. And so that's what I get out of food. And you can take it and fix it, and it's delicious.
Your restaurant has survived so much.
Well, the secret to that, I would like to say, is being faithful and consistent with everything. You can't come in here one day, one way, have something different from what it was yesterday. It has to be consistent. It has to be consistent. And I like for my people to be on time. It's so hard to get them to do that. Oh, Lord.
Mrs. White has survived and thrived through some of our nation's darkest times. From Jim Crow to this current pandemic, she relies on her faith, both in herself and humanity.
In these last year marches, the little girls, the little boys was holding hands and having their little flag talking about Black Lives Matter. A child it just touched my heart when I see children, because children can lead you if you let them, if you listen to them. If you listen to children, we would all be in a better shape.
Brandon, what a cool woman. I've known her for many, many years.
And you and I need to go down there for lunch. Fried chicken and their cornbread, best I've had here in the Valley.
Anytime. Great story, Brandon. Well, he is one of the longest tenured pastors in Phoenix, but many may be surprised to know that he also played a critical role in making a major Arizona holiday official. We got his story coming up.
Charles, who goes by Chaz Jackson, the president of a local Buffalo Soldiers group, his family's history dates back to the 1800s here in Arizona. He's seen a lot of changes over the years, and many stories have been passed down from generation to generation. He shared some of those with me. Even as a child, Chaz Jackson was well aware of his family's history.
This is my mother. Nora Ware Jackson. That's my father, Henry B. Jackson.
They migrated to Arizona from Georgia by way of covered wagon.
I was born in Phoenix, Arizona. My family came out here between 1880 and 1885.
At the age of 80, he remembers vividly what being black in the Valley was like.
Blacks were not allowed to live north of Van Buren. So blacks lived from Monroe, Adams, Washington, Jefferson, and Jackson Street.
Chaz's mother was among some of the first students to experience segregation in schools. In the early 1900s, some of the state's first schools, like George Washington Carver High and Booker T. Washington Elementary School, were established for just that. And though the schools are now gone, the sites remain important symbols of black people's struggle and the area's history.
The Fox Theater and the Paramount Theater, they were more upclass, so it was like a quarter to go there.
Chaz's most vivid memory of encountering racism came at a movie theater.
The white people would be standing there, and when we walked up, they let us go right in. Well, I thought that was unique, but they were taking us upstairs and putting us in the corner, and that was reserved for the coloreds. So I had told my sister about it. I say, you know, every time we go, they take us right upstairs. She said, because they won't let you sit downstairs. Because you black, you can't sit. So that's when I started learning about racism. This is my brood here. This is my daughter, Tiana.
Ironically, he would enjoy moments in a segregated theater, and now his daughter is shattering racial biases that exist on the big screen.
We serve the underestimated, the underrepresented, and the underserved. So what I do is find talented people of all backgrounds.
Tiana Jackson is the first black woman to own 100% of her talent and literary agency called the Jackson Agency. The agency aims to create opportunities and increase representation in the entertainment industry for those who've been disenfranchised.
What we wanted to do was create this actor-artist community that supported one another as we basically kicked doors in Hollywood.
After spending 21 years in Los Angeles, she's back in the Valley. She sees the changes the area has experienced.
It's been interesting to see that change, and then also to see that now we have a black police chief, but then we've still got some dissension in the ranks, right?
But also recognizes there's still a long way to go. While a call for change is nothing new and exists back then and now, Tiana's hopeful for future generations.
Change is not easy, is what I've learned, but it does make me excited for the future, because you're seeing in our youth that they see what's going on and they're not having it, and they're willing to fight the good fight.
A part of that fight for this father-daughter duo is helping to preserve the past. They teach people about the history of the Buffalo Soldiers, who were black soldiers that served after the Civil War. Now, in October, the city of Tucson actually made history as it broke ground on a tribute to the Buffalo Soldiers. And Chaz and Tiana are looking to get support and funding to build a museum right here in Phoenix dedicated to those men. And we'll post more information on our website about this and how you can get involved.
Still to come, Pastor Warren Stewart and his role getting the MLK holiday to come to fruition here in Arizona.
You're watching an Arizona's Family Special, remembering the past, embracing the future. We celebrate the legacy of the historic Tanner Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church.
Located at 8th Street and Jefferson in Central Phoenix, Tanner Chapel is the oldest African-American church in Arizona. It has been at its current location since 1929. Today, Tanner continues its mission to save souls while also serving the community under the leadership of Reverend Dr. Benjamin Thomas Sr., who's been serving as pastor there since 1991.
And just down the street from Tanner Chapel is First Institutional Baptist Church, where for 44 years, Pastor Warren Stewart Sr. has been preaching the gospel. And besides helping save countless souls, Pastor Stewart also played a pivotal role in helping make the MLK holiday become a reality here in Arizona.
His preaching confronted people, y'all, about their sins.
For 44 years, Dr. Warren Stewart Sr. has been preaching the gospel at First Institutional Baptist Church here in Phoenix.
It's the first and only church I've ever pastored in my life.
While saving souls and advocating for numerous community endeavors, Dr. Stewart also played a huge role in helping the MLK holiday become a reality here in Arizona.
I was offended that the state kept disrespecting the life and legacy and ministry of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by rejecting having a paid state holiday like the nation had.
Arizona's quest to make King a holiday began a couple of years after his 1968 assassination. But years went by, and the effort was met with a mountain of pushback, both from lawmakers and citizens who back in 1990 voted against having the King holiday.
Most Arizonans viewed the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday as a black holiday. And since Arizona at that time only had 3 to 3.5%, 4% African Americans, well, we don't need a holiday for a black man because it ain't that many of y'all.
But Dr. Stewart and a coalition of advocates persevered and finally were able to change the hearts and minds of Arizonans. In May of 1986, then Arizona Governor Bruce Babbitt made history.
Governor Babbitt declared and signed the executive order for Arizona's first Martin Luther King Jr. holiday from the pulpit, but he said something very prophetic. He said, you are going to have to fight for this. That was an understatement. And I had threats against my life.
Arizona voters went back to the polls and in 1993 officially approved the MLK holiday. Stewart, who wrote a book about the experience, says Dr. King's dream for equality for all still lives today. And that's all the time we have today. We truly could have spent hours recognizing the countless others who have worked tirelessly, making a positive impact right here in our community.
Yeah, a community, Brandon, with a diverse and rich history that is unknown to a lot of people.
So on behalf of Brandon Aroney and our entire production team, thank you so much for watching.